But anyway, all right, let me get this out of the way. Okay, thanks for joining us. We have Lars Peterson with us. Are you still there, Lars? I don't see you in my, is he still there?
I am here, yes.
Oh, there
Thank
you are.
For having me. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So Lars is a bankruptcy attorney on Oahu. So Lars, I'm just going to let you tell your story. How many years you've been on Oahu, and I always think it's fascinating.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for having me, Kina and group. Be happy to talk to you guys, answer any questions you have, and give you my insight or thoughts on this kind of crystal ball development, I call it. I'm originally from Germany, became a lawyer there, and then 21 years ago I moved to Hawaii, and I'm still here practicing mostly bankruptcy law. Obviously, that involves a lot foreclosure defense as well. It's usually the last resort. I can talk and address it more later on if you guys want to. Why I think it's people consider it too late in the game. But yeah, I do bankruptcy work mostly on the consumer side, so representing debtors. And we also do some tax workouts, tax resolution, and the like, debtor creditor workouts. So if you have any questions in that regard, be happy to answer those. And when I'm not practicing, then Kina puts me on shows every now and then, and I'm happy to be here.
Or we go to dinner when it's not COVID. So
absolutely.
That's how we met. If y'all are wondering how I know a bankruptcy attorney, we both like good food and wine. So not because I claimed bankruptcy, but anyway. So let's talk about the extended moratorium. And you can go ahead and clarify that it was not for foreclosures, but so I'll let you take that over.
Yeah, gladly. So generally we are in this state of I don't know, it's like it seems like a lot of uncertainty and nobody really knows what the situation is exactly, but to the best of my knowledge, there is no longer a foreclosure moratorium in effect. It actually did expire. We have seen cases already resuming and being in progress, including with federally backed mortgages. And we just filed a bankruptcy case to prevent an auction happening where a homeowner would have lost the house. And so the auction is, I don't know, I think probably on Tuesday. And we just filed the case last minute, if you will, to make sure the foreclosure cannot happen. As when you file a bankruptcy case, the automatic stay comes into place, and anything that happens after without further permission from the bankruptcy court is void. So even if the auction occurred, the house gets sold, and other things happen, they're all void. It's not even a selection. Legally, we distinguish between void and voidable. So you cannot even choose. It's automatically void as if the auction never happened. But there is, much to many people's and landlords' dismay, still an eviction moratorium in place. I believe the Hawaiian one, the state one, has actually expired on August 6th. Governor Ige finally decided not to extend that. As much as I sympathize with tenants about the situation, I also have friends who are homeowners who are renting out places or parts of their house, and some of them have not collected rent in over a year, and for many people that's literally almost impossible. I think being a consumer attorney, I have to say that it looks to me in the overall picture that the landlords really have the shortest straw in all this, also with the limited foreclosure defense relief and everything. There's much more help on the tenant side. The eviction moratorium lately, despite a Supreme Court case saying it's questionable whether it should be upheld, and mostly, as it's mostly understood, ruling against the CDC order, basically saying the CDC doesn't have authority to issue this eviction moratorium, which it previously did. because Congress didn't act. And obviously that is nothing new. The Biden administration was under a lot of pressure and then just decided to have the CDC issue another eviction moratorium, and it is extended now to, I believe, October 3rd. So I think even if there's a lawsuit or anything, I don't think many eviction processes will start, commence, or courts would take them up before that date. So we still have to live for a couple of months probably with this situations. I do get also all the COVID-19 related state court orders from the state courts and the federal courts here in Hawaii. And it is quite clear, the tone, that unless you absolutely have to and there's no way around, you should really consider mediation and not move forward with a foreclosure and an eviction. There's definitely a tone of discouragement to proceed that way. So I think right now the foreclosures are slow. There's a huge backlog. There will be catch-up time. A day of reckoning, I think, will come ultimately. And yeah, that's basically where we are in the current situation.
So we are seeing the auctions, the foreclosure auctions have started back up again. Were those already set into motion before COVID, or I guess I'm not understanding the timing of how we are seeing those auctions take place now. So I guess, yeah.
The foreclosure has always it's a somewhat lengthy process. So usually, I don't know how familiar you guys are with the foreclosure process, but basically a complaint is filed like any civil lawsuit. You're being served, and then the process server says, here you go, and you found out, oh my God, foreclosure, right? You knew you were behind and try to catch up, or you didn't get a loan modification. And so now the lender has filed, you get served. Then the first step that has to be taken is to file an answer, because if you don't file an answer in the prescribed time frame, which is usually with 20 or 30 days, depending on if it's state or federal, then you're in default, and then the lender can ask for entry of a default judgment, which generally is good enough to proceed with the foreclosure. If there is an answer, which we oftentimes are consulted about when people are in that situation, they say, I'm not ready to file bankruptcy, but I just was served, then we sometimes advise on this part that they need to file an answer. Once an answer is filed, basically you took the first step in the defense. Now what happens is officially, legally, the discovery process starts. But the lender usually doesn't have to do much discovery. This is not a personal injury case or manufacturing defect. They have their documents and everything already pretty handy. And they know, hey, this is person A didn't pay, they're this much in default. Yes, I filed an answer, but what I do now is I file a motion for summary judgment. The motion for summary judgment is basically, dear judge, look at all these documents. There is no question of law. There is no uncertainty. When you look at this stuff, we are going to win. There should be a judgment now, a favor entered. We should be allowed to proceed with a foreclosure. And oftentimes that is the case. The lenders and the lender attorneys don't get paid really very much for these. It's a little bit, like a case mill that they're running through. So every now and then there's some sloppiness and things. They don't rush it, they don't push it. To this day, I have not figured out why they foreclose on certain properties and homeowners and not on others. There is no rhyme or reason as far as is there equity or no equity, the house underwater. Is it 1 or 5 payments behind? I've seen every single scenario you can think of, and a scenario where, yes, they moved for foreclosure, and the other one where they didn't. So I'm not sure what the criteria really are. They seem to be at higher levels, more generic on which pools they wanna eliminate bad mortgages, so to speak. But we're at the summary judgment stage. And again, as in anywhere in the process, if the lender gets a foreclosure judgment, then they have the foreclosure commissioner appointed. The foreclosure commissioner is in and will then contact usually the homeowner and say, will you agree that I can hold open houses so we can, improve the price? They always try to give the argument that if you do open houses, then there's a likelihood that you're selling the property for a little bit more than if you do it sight unseen, basically. Um, as a defense mechanism, it's always good not to agree to that, because then the lender has actually to file a motion with the court and ask for permission to sell the house without the property without open houses, right? Because there shouldn't be an issue that they tried the best to get a fair market value as much as can under the circumstances. So that buys you a little bit more time. And then at some point, usually the summary judgment, sometimes it gets defeated, but most of the time it does get granted. When people contact us, we usually recommend don't let a judgment enter against you. So make sure you file an answer or have somebody help you file an answer that there is no default. And don't let the summary judgment be granted, because every time you can stop the clock in some shape or form will buy you significantly more time. I also have seen the cases where people come in and say, "Hey, Lars, I'm facing foreclosure auction. When is it?" "On Tuesday." And I said, "Well, that was like a 2, 3, 4 year process, right?" And it's like, and now you're coming in and then you're telling them this is the amount you have to pay, let's say $3,000 for a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. "Oh my God, this is so much money." Right? And the scenario is always, you've already spent tens, 20, $30,000, right, in foreclosure defense and doing that, and it's kind of the last straw, but you got to do it. But the blame ends always with the bankruptcy attorney, that this whole process is so lengthy, so burdensome, and so expensive, right? And as soon as a bankruptcy is filed, like I said, the automatic stay is in place. And again, what that means is nothing can go forward. If it does, you can disregard it. It didn't happen legally.
Yeah. So that would not be a real estate agent's job to give any of that advice, but I can always connect you with Lars that can tell people what they need to do if they do get in that situation.
And I think it's not actually legal advice. I mean, I think for a real estate agent, it's really good to know, to really understand where are you in the process, right? And is it like, oh, I was served with a foreclosure complaint, or the auction is on Tuesday, right? There are different levels of urgency. Or is a motion pending, right? Will I now be faced with a judgment where the judge said, yes, it's proper to foreclose, please proceed now and go forward and set the auction, right?
Yeah,
so there are certain times I said, where are you in this process, right? And that always tells you, I recommend you should consult with an attorney, whether it's a bankruptcy attorney or not, just for the understanding of, at some point, you guys might not be necessary because there will be a public auction and not a sale of the property, right?
So in your opinion, do you think we're going to see more foreclosures? You did say they take 4 or 5 years. Are we going to see more foreclosures and more short sales now that the moratorium has ended? And well, we were getting back on our feet, but it looks like we're going the other direction now. But what in your opinion do you think we'll see?
Yeah, so just quickly, so the length of the process, again, really depends on your actions, right, as the homeowner. Because if you disregard, head in the sand, ostrich, attitude, it can be much, much faster that your house is gone and you don't own it anymore suddenly, right? But in the past 18 months, no evictions, no foreclosures, and that has put a huge wrench into the market, and we are facing an enormous backlog. And so I think the number of foreclosure cases and obviously evictions too should rise quite a bit, barring, of course, always the actions the government may take. Because if 40% of Hawaiian people will be homeless, right, I'm almost certain there will be additional eviction moratoria at least, which can also affect, of course, homeowners, right? If a foreclosure is complete and you're no longer the homeowner legally, right? People still stay at their house until somebody actually kicks them out, right, to the end. And then if there's an eviction moratorium, you also, as a former homeowner, don't have to leave until you are legally, guided away from your property. So I do think barring the government's strong intervention, there will be foreclosures. I also don't think that the market will stay as hot as it has been. I really think this extended need for working from home, where people said, well, the family is home and the kids are home, distance learning, we are working from home. That really created a surprisingly huge demand, maybe not so surprisingly, given our low supply, relatively constant low supply in Hawaii. But the kids are back in school. So that's already taking a little bit off, and there may be some minor school closures or so coming up, but again, unless we have a third and fourth wave, schools will remain open. And in the long run, it will be, whether it's a year or two, it will be in-person school. So the kids are out of the house most of the day. It's not that you're sitting in a two-bedroom apartment with a family of five anymore, and then you need the noise canceling headsets to just be able to work, right? That scenario is changing a little bit. Larger employers in the mainland too, there are a lot of, I think, executives that thought, whether I live 20 minutes from my office in Silicon Valley or 5.5 hours by plane, I'm not going in, so it doesn't matter. I might as well sit on my veranda lanai in Hawaii, right, and look at the beach and hear the palm trees and work from there. Doesn't make much of a difference, but I think that's kind of saturated. I don't think there's that huge of a demand. And in the end, there's us, right? The people who live here, the folks who live and stay in Hawaii, and we got to be able to buy and sell houses. You guys in particular, but the population, obviously, we need to be able to afford certain ones. And I think overall, I think there will be, I don't want to call it a day of reckoning, but the foreclosures that haven't happened, they're not going away. They're still in default. It is not, with the foreclosure not happening and a new, more solvent owner, having bought and then paid off the delinquent mortgage and now dealing and regularly paying the new mortgage. I think that is probably a relatively small number. So yeah, I think the numbers will go up. The question is literally just when.
All right. So what can we do to prepare as real estate agents? I mean, you just kind of said you think it's going to kind of level off. And I shared some of the information I got from The Economist this week. And he had the same nationally. He said, yeah, we're going to level off. We're not going to drop. It's not a bubble, but we are going to level off. So what do we need to do to prepare for as agents for what's coming? What would you suggest?
I think what's really important for real estate agents is to not only focus on closing the deal and the sale, but to really, or the purchase, right? But to really be aware of the entire situation. Where is the homeowner in that situation? Where are they at, right? Are they facing foreclosure? Are they saying, I want to make sure I'm recovering this nice equity cushion that I've built up, right? I maybe have a cash flow problem, but I don't want a foreclosure. At some point, I just want to say I have $250,000 in cash, in equity sitting in there. Let's cash it out while the prices are high. So it's really important, I think, to understand the situation of where is the homeowner, or the seller, the buyer, whoever you represent, where are they at, what are their financial means. I can just tell you, I always see it on the back end, right? We come in when somebody says, my house is being foreclosed on. The auction is on Tuesday. What can you do, right? So we file a bankruptcy and then we stop it. So now we've bought them more time. But then what do I need to look at? Then suddenly the realtor contacts me and said, no, they want to sell it. They want to sell it. We're working on it. And I said, okay, give me the numbers, right? What's a realistic fair market value you can put it on the market for? And what's really realistic comparables, right, to get it? We want to try and see that it is not a distressed sale. So we want to facilitate sales and assist with that. But I'm amazed at nowadays, it has changed a lot over the past 10 plus years, how little title and escrow are doing and knowing. And oftentimes too, how realtors saying, no, we are handling a sale. And I said, okay, what's the price, right? What are you selling it for? And at the very minimum, right, you got to know what are the mortgages, at least approximately on there, right? Is a first, is there a second, is there a lien by an association? Then when you contacting me or my office, they're in bankruptcy, there's usually always a bankruptcy component to it. So We have sales of property real estate approved in bankruptcy all the time. It's not that it's impossible or you can't do it. It's fairly regular that we are doing it, but it just requires court approval, and obviously it's got to make sense. So if your house is worth 700,000 and the first mortgage is 800, yes, you got to work a short sale, right? And you got to work it so at an absolute minimum that usually the people that we see, they don't want to pay a dime out of pocket, right? Because once they're in a bankruptcy, they can say, you know what, I cannot make any money from selling this property, so I'm just surrendering in the bankruptcy. So as long as I complete my bankruptcy case, I don't own the house anymore. They probably can still live there for a few months, and then they found a rental place, and in the end, when they get a discharge in bankruptcy, the note is charged off. They have no deficiency, no nothing. They're free and clear of all this thing, right? That also means if you do a little bit of the ground and the legwork, you know if it's worth your while working on this case. We have sometimes realtors who push and do all these things, and then I look at it and I say, the finances don't work. There's a first mortgage, there's a second mortgage, there's an association, there's a tax lien, and all these secured claims, they have to be paid off, plus any costs of the sale, right? And in Hawaii, you can almost, if you guys get full commission, right, you can almost think 9% is of the sales price is a cost that comes in. Sometimes realtors say, okay, we're reducing a little bit, or we can, work some things out, but the finances got to be there, right? Otherwise, you can push and be a super realtor, and it's like if the money is not there, there is no incentive for a debtor, besides not having a foreclosure on their credit report. There's zero incentive for a debtor if they're in bankruptcy to do that, or for anybody outside of bankruptcy, right? If they can sell it and pay everything off, sometimes lenders will say, yep, we are accepting this amount, but you got to sign a new note that says you still owe us 100 grand, basically a deficiency judgment, right? Who wants to start after losing the house with a deficiency judgment, right? So now you don't have the house, and on top of it, you're still paying your old lender whom you didn't like to begin with anymore, right? So it's really important to just, where's the homeowner in that situation? What are the finances like? Does this make any sense? In a perfect world, when people have some equity in their property, and it's just that they have now no longer the means to maintain their payments, they want to cash in on that equity. And if it works perfectly, what we usually do is we sell the property, we get it approved, the mortgages get paid off, so the sale is complete, you guys get your commissions, right? And the closing costs are taken care of in there. And then on top of it, our client and our common client can then pay off the bankruptcy and be done with it. That's what they obviously love the most. But for that, you usually have to have at least a bit of equity in there.
So yeah, so we do have a question. I have to put these on to read
Please.
it. Don't judge. If it takes 5 years average for a foreclosure in Hawaii, we won't expect to see these foreclosures to be available to our buyers or the listings to our book of business until 2025 or 2026. So is that what we can expect?
Well, that's if you assume that it starts now, right? So like I explained a little bit in the beginning, where are we in the foreclosure process? There are foreclosures, like I said, that were basically about to end, right? All that is happening is the auction. And then the latest step that has to happen is there's in the state court hearing where the foreclosure happens, there is a confirmation hearing where the judge says, are there any overbidders? Hearing none. Okay, the sale is final, the auction is approved. And as soon as that order enters, you're absolutely no longer the owner of that property, no matter what it says in the Bureau of Conveyances or Land Court. So many foreclosures are much farther along, right? They were on the verge of auction before the bankruptcy hit or the foreclosure moratorium and all that. So where are you in this stage? No, I think with the foreclosures resuming, you will see that much, much sooner.
Yeah, because I know there are auctions now because there's a few. And honestly, I just picked up a short sale yesterday, which was already in the process. They were in trouble before COVID.
Right.
So do we have any other questions for Lars? Anything you guys are dying to know? And I do have his contact that if you guys have a client that, looks like they might be in trouble. Um, I know we still see properties that are tenant occupied. And I think you and I have
Mhm.
talked about this before. What do you recommend if there's something on the market and they have tenants in place with this moratorium? What would you suggest we suggest to our clients?
That is really a very tough question. I mean, I would put if you put yourself in the shoes of a buyer, then that's your client, right? Yes, it's no longer your problem once everything is done, but they'll also not be happy if you say, no, no, go ahead and just buy it. And then it takes them forever to get the tenant out and the tenant is not paying, right? And I don't know, it's very difficult to say because right now I think there will be a lot of evictions coming at some point, right? More than average than what we've seen before. But the general tenant who gets evicted, I've seen this a number of times in court. They're very litigious and they get all personally offended and affected, and they think the landlord and landlady did something wrong. And when friends or people have consulted with me and I said, oh, I really want to fight this, I always try to remind them that even if the landlord loses the eviction, the next thing you get is a letter and that says they're using their statutory right and giving you I can't remember now, was it 42 days notice and then, or 45, and then you have to be out. There's no cause, no nothing, it's just a notice and then you're out. But back to where we are right now, there is a backlog. It will take time to process all this. Put yourselves in your client's shoes. If you want to sell some or help somebody buy a property, would you buy it now when you think there may be 3, 6, 12 months or so of uncertainty that you can rent it out, right? It's, I think it's a case by case situation. And that's again where I think a good real estate agent points that out, because any potential client, right, or anybody who retains you will appreciate you even more if you tell them, here's a risk you got to take into account, right? And let me advise you of this. And if you're not certain, consult, hire legal counsel, and to be sure, because some people say, oh, this is such a good deal, I can wait 6 months. Right? It's not a problem, right? I start off with 100 grand in equity based on what I'm buying if it works out at this price, right? Or some equity at least. And others are saying, if I can basically clean up and 2 weeks later I need to start renting, if that doesn't work, my finances don't work anymore, then they shouldn't buy it, right? At this point, there's still too much uncertainty. And again, we have that situation too. Clients have a tendency to blame others, right? So if something doesn't work, it's usually my fault, right? And if they can't make a trustee payment or keep paying the mortgage, somehow that's my fault, right? And if you are participating and advising a client in buying a house and they really, with attorney, have the hardest time getting the client out, you will not be on their good side, right? They're not coming back.
That is probably the best
Even,
advice. Ask yourself if you wouldn't make that investment yourself before you, and make sure you maybe have them talk to someone like Lars. Like what can they do with these tenants if they stop paying?
yeah.
All right, we can open it up to any other questions. I went through my list of questions. Anybody? Did you have
I'd be
any?
happy to answer anything you guys. I can provide input to. I wanted to say one thing that I feel important, was very important, is really foreclosure defense versus bankruptcy. I oftentimes see, like I said, people on the back end, right? You say, man, I want to help this client, and I think we can actually sell the property. Foreclosure is already moving along, and then they spend tens of thousands of dollars on foreclosure defense. Honestly, I don't know what's there to defend about. Are you not in default? I think that's out of the question. The lender filed a foreclosure because you're in default, right? Sometimes they don't have the note. Sometimes they don't have the original mortgage document, and you may be able to buy some time, but at what price, right? If you don't mind spending 50 grand defending that and it bought you 6 months of time, absolutely. But then the people come in, and with the bankruptcy, we oftentimes can buy 6, 12, sometimes 24 months of time. And we have people that are living years later in the property still, and they would like to do a loan mod and save it. But it's really, I think that's a very important part to know, because people literally have sent money to Florida. Somebody was supposed to help them save the house. I sent 25 grand to Florida, and now they called me yesterday and said, you need to file bankruptcy because we can't stop the foreclosure, right? And people are so desperate that they send 25 grand to Florida. Then they hire an attorney, and I'm sure you've heard about it. They're like, Gary Dubin is an attorney who is now disbarred. He made a lot of money doing foreclosure defense. And every now and then there's some success, but at what cost, right? Is that so? A bankruptcy you file, you put a stop in it, and literally you can sort some things out a little later. But I'm sorry, I saw there was a question earlier.
Yes, there are some. So at what point would it be too late to help our client? My client is in lis pendens state, but once a sheriff sale is served, is that it?
No, you can absolutely still help. In Hawaii, if it's a judicial foreclosure, the sale is the auction is final once the state court entered the confirmation order on its record. So in a worst case scenario, if the auction happens on Tuesday, and usually the state court confirmation hearings, they take some time, sometimes only a month or two, but oftentimes we've seen almost they are 6 to 12 months later. As long as that hearing hasn't happened and the subsequent order been entered on the state court docket, you are still legally the owner. So if we file a bankruptcy before that order enters by a minute or a second, you are still the owner of the house, or your client is still the owner of the house. The lis pendens is a legal term that just says, if I'm looking for a house and I want to buy it, and I look at the records and I said, oh, there is litigation, there is something pending, that's all that does. So the lis pendens is just a notice informing the public that if you buy that, there might be something in the happening, the lender foreclosing or something of that sort happening.
Okay.
And I see there's did
Yeah.
that answer the question, Samantha?
Yes. All right. So the next one is, Lars, if you were a new residential agent, would you spend time to seek for and assist sellers with distressed properties?
Well, I would start with high-end real estate. That's easier. The commissions are bigger. No, but seriously, when you're a new residential real estate agent, I think it's a very good area to work in. I think you probably have to work a little harder. You will have very grateful and appreciative clients if you can make that work. And I think Kina can probably speak to that area.
Actually, I'm going to let Lisa, I think she's the only one on here that can speak to that. Lisa, what do you think about a new agent working with distressed properties?
Well, you know, my first thing is you should be working to find clients that are ready, willing, and able. And I think if you're a brand new agent, first of all, we owe a fiduciary duty to our clients. And the level of detail and knowledge that's necessary to work with a short sale or foreclosure property is definitely a higher level. So I don't, you know, I have some concerns about it. And I think it's a case-by-case basis. You had better be, and unfortunately, one of the best certified distressed property organizations went out of business about 2 years too early for this market, which was CDPE designation. And I wish they would come back, because there's a lot to learn to make sure you don't lead your clients astray. I think the first big issue everybody has, again, you hear this over and over, is you should all be working on your sphere first. You should be learning how to internet market, and you should find clients wherever they are. I think to go out after distressed properties is a longer term game and takes a lot more knowledge, and the sales don't occur as quickly. So you absolutely can
very long time.
That,
it's a very long game.
Yeah, so it's a long game. So I think if you're new, you know, you've got to be fighting to get business that closes and keeps you sustained now. So it wouldn't, from a productivity coaching standpoint, it wouldn't be my first choice for those reasons. Just get out and get any business you can, and do the right thing for the client. So if you feel you can do the right thing for your client, you understand what can happen with taxation issues, with giving the advice, you know, it could even be security clearances. With people that choose to go into foreclosure, it might impact their security clearance because we have a lot of military. So you've got to make sure you have an arsenal of professionals around you that can give them good advice and that you understand the ins and outs.
Yes. Okay.
Thanks for
All right. So
asking,
we
Kina.
have another one. Well, I wasn't going to answer it. So anyway, I can tell you short sales take six months plus, and very early hours in the morning on the phone on hold for hours, and you don't
We
know
spent a
what
year on a $360,000 short sale recently, and it was distressed. It was in foreclosure. There was a divorce moratorium put on it. You know, it's usually not, when people find themselves in this situation, and Lars can probably attest to it, you know, you have multiple stressors that occur. It's not unusual to see a family in foreclosure, the financial distress that caused it. They end up, there's usually maybe a health issue or a job loss issue. It can cause divorce, or it might be caused by divorce issues. So you have this whole cascade of events, and there are so many legal interventions that you may spend a year and a half on these things.
Yes, and there's no guarantee you're going to get paid at the end. Those investors can say no.
Yeah.
So, all right, can a property be auctioned and also listed by an agent at the same time?
Yes.
Yes.
That's not a problem. We oftentimes have that. Obviously, arguably once the auction has happened, or at the latest when the foreclosure, the confirmation hearing in state court has happened, at that point, you probably should take the listing down, because you can't sell the property anymore. It's not your clients to sell anymore. And I want to actually second what Lisa said. That's a very good qualification. Can you deal with distressed property? Yes, but I think there are very important considerations: the time delay, the qualification, the potential effect of, as you said, military personnel. Negative financial transactions can have a great impact on security clearances for military personnel. And it is interesting that we get this question as bankruptcy attorneys all the time. And people say, I cannot lose my security clearance, but I have 100,000 in credit card debt. And they are very surprised usually to learn that if you file a bankruptcy, well, there's federal law that prevents from being discriminated just based on filing the bankruptcy. So the military cannot say, you filed bankruptcy, because of that we are firing you and take your security clearance away. That would be a discrimination. It's violating federal law. And on top of it, in general, the bankruptcy restores and supports the renewance of security clearance, because bankruptcy is federally authorized and is an alternative, right, to resolving your debt in other ways. And if you are military personnel and you have 100,000 in credit card debt, the military is much more concerned that you leave the door open or put something on a thumb drive, right? Than because now money might be tight, right? Now North Korea or whoever, Russia, anybody, China can come and can say, here's a nice big check, right? Helps with the tuition, car payment, house payment. How about it, right? Now you're much more susceptible to that. Once you file a bankruptcy and you have a discharge, that issue is out the window, right? You had some financial problems, but they no longer exist. So we've oftentimes been able to help people restore and renew their security clearance with that way.
All right. So I don't know if you know the answer to this. Would you be able to discuss the auction process? How does the auction work? Do you know?
Yeah. I mean, in general, it's, I actually don't know how they updated it. It used to be always here in Honolulu on the steps of the court. Actually, it was basically, you're covered there right in front of the circuit court. They moved them a little bit to the side. They didn't allow it to go forward on that property, but it's by the court. It's a group of people standing there with the foreclosure commissioner and literally saying, bidding money. And the greatest advantage always has, of course, the first mortgage company, because they can credit bid, right? If their first mortgage is 700,000, then they say 700,000, right? And so you start right after that, if you will, because they already loaned the money, they paid for it, right? So they don't have to come up with any additional money unless it goes higher. And then at some point, if there are bidders and the minimum bidding requirement that's set out in the requirements by the court order or by what the commissioner has determined. Once that is met, then sold, and then it goes to, at some point, they'll report back to the court, and the lender's attorney will ask that the confirmation hearing be set. And then once that is set and order entered, then the property is sold at that price, barring any overbidders coming into the actual courtroom, right? So you can go into the courtroom and you can say, oh, and there will be overbidding is usually in certain increments. So you cannot say $700,000 and 1 cent. Usually what happens is that they say minimum of initially 20,000 and then in $10,000 steps or something like that. But you could come in and say, Your Honor, my name is John Smith and and we are bidding 720,000, right? And then if there's equity or potential for it, and other people might overbid. And if that happens, then that new amount there will be the determinative factor. And then obviously you've got to complete everything, have the actual certified money with you, a certain percentage. At the overbidding, you may have to have all the money there. You got to look at what the foreclosure commissioner requires, or get in touch with the foreclosure commissioner and then say, by when do you need the full amount? And then you got to have the money there ideally, and if not, very quickly after that hearing.
Yes. Well, you actually have to have 10% of it with you. Yeah. And if you get cashier's checks, it's got to be 10% in cashier's checks. And you must have the exact amount that you're 10% of your bid, which you got to figure out how you're going to do that. So, and someone asked 10% cashier's check and no inspection. You can do an inspection they usually have open houses that you can find in the newspaper. So you can do your inspection during an open house. There is no 10-day J1 per se, but go do your inspection before. But I'll tell you, they're crazy right now. There's probably 50 people at every auction. Okay, so the next question. How long after a bankruptcy filing is the owner covered for?
Covered for what?
I guess, because you mentioned that if they file bankruptcy, they stop the foreclosure.
Okay, so what happens is when you file the bankruptcy, there's a statute, the automatic stay, that is effective as soon as I hit the file button at my office. I get a bankruptcy case number, and anything that happens a second after is void. And that stays in place in general for the duration of the bankruptcy case. So in these situations, we would file a Chapter 13. They're usually 3 to 5 years long, the cases. Don't always have to be completed, but those are the general timeframes that under the bankruptcy code are permitted. And what happens then is your pre-petition arrears, right? Whether it's 10,000, 150,000, or 300,000, that amount that you were in arrears at the time of filing gets rolled into the bankruptcy plan. Yeah. So basically, you have to resume paying your mortgage. Okay. If you want further protection, you have to make your trustee payments. The trustee will collect payments from you that get dispersed to your creditors, and first and foremost, will be catching you up on the mortgage arrears that you are coming in with into the bankruptcy. Now, if you do not resume, we call it post-petition because it's called you filing a petition for bankruptcy. So after the filing, post-petition, if you don't resume payments, the mortgage lender will then come in and say, well, pre-petition before the filing, that's fine. You roll that into the plan. But now also the debtor and borrower is not making any payments since the filing. That is not covered by the bankruptcy. They will ask the bankruptcy court for permission to lift the automatic stay. And once that happens, the protection for your house is gone. Yeah, then for that specific creditor, so if it's the first mortgage company or the association or the second, whoever is it, once that is granted, they can technically resume or begin foreclosure proceedings at that point. One option to deal with that is a lot of people right now are asking for forbearance, right? So that they don't have to make the current payments. this isn't a topic in and of itself that we've already talked about, Kina.
We have a
can
whole
address it.
show. So.
Right. Which is kind of, I feel like, a fraud on anybody who is actually using that option, not being fully aware of what it is. But people with small arrears, they usually are capable of catching up. If you're on a 5-year plan and you have a $3,000 mortgage, you fell behind, right? And let's say you're $30,000 in arrears, well, divided by 60, add a little bit on as cushion. That's your monthly trustee payment. So if you can make your mortgage payment going forward, you can make your trustee payment, you come out 5 years later, you're current again. If somebody comes in with 300,000, we have some trickery up our sleeves for that, but eventually, after about 1 year, within the first year and a half, they need to try to refinance or get a loan modification, because if not, their monthly plan payments on top of their mortgage will just simply be too high for them to sustain that. But the bankruptcy also allows, then circling back, the sale of the property. And we have usually enough time so that it's not truly a distressed sale property anymore, right? If the foreclosure is there and you say, we really got to do it and it's bring it out, people just naturally bid lower. That's just the way it is. And oftentimes we can buy our clients quite a bit of time to let that foreclosure process be halted, and then really just put it on the market, do advertising, see what offers are there. And right now, if it's not a shoebox that you wouldn't let your dog sleep in, right? If it's a somewhat decent property, it's gonna sell over asking price, right? So you will really have that opportunity, and especially if there's equity, your clients will love that because you get paid, right? We in the end get paid. They pay off their bankruptcy, and they at least got something out of it. They walk away with some money, oftentimes too, and they're done. They don't have that burden anymore and bend over backwards and keep covering for paying for numerous family members who rarely or barely contribute.
Okay, so it looks like we have one more. What is the time frame on the right to redemption?
There is no real specific redemption right in Hawaii. What usually happens is the lenders in general don't really want to foreclose. So they're happy to have a sale go forward so they get paid off in full, especially a second mortgage, because oftentimes they get a haircut. They almost never, in a somewhat distressed property, get paid a lot, definitely not in full for most properties. And there are also ways we try to work in at times where we are finding out the reinstatement value, right? The reinstatement amount. So where they said, if you pay X amount, that will bring the mortgage current. And lenders do work with the borrower and potential debtor to see if there can be a payment plan done. Some are more agreeable than others, as always in this. And again, if nothing else works, I can determine the reinstatement amount within a couple of months, usually after, because once we filed the bankruptcy, the lender is required to file a proof of claim to participate in distribution from the bankruptcy trustee. And then we can know exactly on the date of filing, this is the amount they were in arrears.
Okay, so we have another one. I don't know if you'll know the answer to this. Maybe. What is the average percentile below market value that distressed properties sell for in Oahu or on Oahu? Do you have those right now?
I have.
No, they don't. So,
right.
Yeah.
I actually don't have an answer to that. I probably have to defer to you guys to answer that one.
Kina, mine's going to be that properties always sell at market value. When there's this much demand.
The distressed ones are selling above market value because.
Well, definitionally, what a buyer is willing to pay and a seller is willing to accept is market value. It's just not appraised value.
Yes. So I will say
this kind of leads into what we said earlier too, is like really know the situation of the client, and I guess I should say that of the market as well, right? not every property is the same, right? Some properties are, oh, it's located Diamond Head near Kahala. Oh, there's already, oh, okay, this would be good. Oh, this is more Wahiwa. Like, okay, why not? Oh, okay, I'm not so sure. What's the condition, right? That will, a lot of it, it's really a case by case basis, right? And where you say, hey, comparables in that area, what's a realistic sales price, right? This is really the starting point for you guys. And not so much for your commission. I know that is for me too. I run a business. We have to think about that. But at the same time is really say, okay, if we can get this price, what happens? How can we pay the mortgages off? Where is this going? Will this make the client happy?
So yes. So I think we'll end it there. Again, making the client happy. And again, I think your best advice was, you got to ask yourself, would you do it? How would you want to be taken care of? Especially if you had gotten yourself into a situation. Well, thank you so much, Lars. And if anybody has a client that has gotten themselves into a situation, I can share Lars' contact with you, and you can share with them. He is great, and he works for wine, and that other thing.
And food.
Wine, money. So yes, but thank you, Lars. And after our numbers settle down, we're going to dinner. So
no, absolutely. Yeah. Feel free to reach out to me also if you're not sure, and just if you said, hey, what do I need to consider here? Because I think that will ease any transaction and any situation where there is a sale or a purchase. Is there maybe a foreclosure pending? Are you dealing already with a property in bankruptcy? The more you have information and the more you consult, and then we say, hey, I have this situation, it makes you look a lot smarter than rather going back to your client and then later say, well, we can't make these numbers work even remotely, right? So client will say, how did that happen 3 months later that you had no idea, right? So good advice giving is really crucial, and you can get it. You can get my number, so I'll be happy to help.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I will see you all.
Aloha.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you, Lars. Thanks, Kina.
Bye. Mahalo.